This morning and this session will provide updates on the legislative and administrative landscape for diversity and innovation. As you know, it's rapidly changing with many pending legislative actions, with a lot of different diversity initiatives, both from WIPO and the USPTO, as well as with companies, universities, and other organizations like IPO developing significant efforts to this issue. So our panelists of esteemed speakers on this issue will each provide some information on their area of that innovation ecosphere and the diversity and innovation initiative landscape. So I will introduce our esteemed panel. To my left is Dr. Elodie Carpentier. She's a research fellow at the Department for Economics and Data Analysis of the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, in Geneva, Switzerland. She's on a fellowship with Invent Together, and she conducts research on the extent and origins of diversity gaps in innovation, with a specific, but not exclusive, focus on the gender gap in patenting. Elodie's traveled all the way from Geneva, so she wins the award on our panel for the furthest travel. So huge thanks to Elodie for making the time to be here with us today. Next, we have Samantha Aguayo, IPO's Deputy Executive Director and Chief IP Counsel. Many of you in this audience know her very well through her work with many of our IPO subcommittees. She oversees about half of the substantive IPO committees, and she heads up IPO's U.S. Government Relations Program. She has been with IPO for just about 22 years, officially 22 next month, and she's had a variety of roles over the many years. So we welcome Sam to our panel. Next, we have Valencia Martin Wallace, who's the Deputy Commissioner for Patents at the USPTO, where she manages and leads the patent organization's efforts related to international IP harmonization and oversees patent examining functions in technology centers that examine the technologies of communication, mechanical engineering, manufacturing and medical devices, processes, and design. Specifically with respect to international IP harmonization, Valencia provides executive leadership on international patent legal issues and various work-sharing efforts with international partners. And very pertinent to this panel, Valencia is currently the executive lead for the USPTO's initiative for the Council for Inclusive Innovation, CI², which Director Vidal mentioned yesterday. And last, but certainly not least, is Holly Fechner, who's the Executive Director of Invent Together, an alliance supported by organizations, universities, companies, and other stakeholders dedicated to understanding the gender, race, and other diversity gaps in invention and patenting. They also support public policy and private initiatives to close those gaps. Additionally, Holly is a partner at the law firm Covington & Burlington, where she co-chairs the firm's technology industry group. Holly previously served as the policy director to Senator Edward Kennedy. And my name is Sandra Novak. I am an associate chief IP counsel at 3M Company, and I co-chair IPO's Women in IP Committee and Diverse Inventors Subcommittee. So with our amazing panel introduced, the first thing that we're going to do is turn the stage over to Elodie, who's going to provide some data that really sets the stage for the conversation we're about to have, so that we can see a snapshot of what the diversity and innovation space looks like. Elodie.
Thank you, Sandra. So, first of all, what I'm going to give you is a picture of the gender gap in patenting worldwide. And this is part of a broader research agenda that we have at WIPO to investigate also other diversities, maybe the ethnicity, the socio-economic background of inventors in patenting, but also hopefully in trademark and design. So there is a series of studies that are going to come out. And let me right now give you some figures on the current landscape. So we are using the PCT data, so all patents, international patents that have been filed over the past 20 years, that are 3 million plus patents, and 15 million inventors. And we assign the gender of inventors based on the World Gender Name Dictionary, a tool that our team developed 6 years ago and updated very recently. And we use 3 different metrics. The first metric, that is the most common one, is the number or the share of patents with at least one woman inventor. And you can easily grasp that this is maybe not the most or the ideal measure, because a patent that would include 10 inventors and 1 is a woman would be considered as important or have the same weight than a patent with 2 women. So we include 2 other measures, with our, the woman inventor rate. Among inventors, how many are women? And with the woman's share of patenting. So a patent with 10 inventors, but just 1 is a woman, would be assigned 1/10 of a patent to women, and a patent only invented by women will be counted as 1. Based on these 3 indicators that you are seeing on the screen, we see that as of 2020, 31% of patents included at least 1 woman, and as a matter of comparison, men were present on 97% of those patents. And by the 2 other metrics, the woman inventor rate, women were 1 in 8 inventors, so 15%, and women invented only 15% of the patents in 2020. The good thing is that the trend is going upwards, so we have a positive trend, but at this current pace, we would only reach parity in another century from now. Of course, this is on the international scene, but if we look into continents, we see that Latin America and the Caribbean are the all-time leader in women's inclusion in patenting. And the interesting second case is Asia, that went from the last world's position 20 years ago from the second world most inclusive continent in the world. Excuse me. This hides great diversity within the continents, and if we pick only the most patenting countries within each continent, we can rank them based on the rate of women among inventors, and we see that China, Spain, and the Republic of Korea are the top 3 countries in the world, closely followed by many Latin American countries, and Sweden and Germany are rather at the bottom of the ranking. And this ranking could be partly explained by the industrial composition of each. For instance, Germany has a very strong mechanical engineering industry, and this likely explains a great share. So if we look at the rates in each industry, we see that chemistry field, including biotechnology, pharmaceuticals, are displaying high rates of women inventors. And of course, electrical and mechanical engineering are rather at the bottom. And this ranking doesn't change much over time. Now, if we look around sectors, we see that academia and research organizations, universities tend to have higher rate of women among inventors as compared to companies or individuals. And that was it. And that's the last one. Now we looked at teams of inventors or inventors on the patent, and we see this very clear pattern where almost 80% of patents are invented either by men alone, which is the light blue area on the bottom, or by teams of men, which is the green area. And the trends are driven by women being included in mostly male teams, which is the orange area, and women working alone, which is on top the dark blue area. But very, very few women work in teams or are a majority in numbers in mixed gender teams. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Elodie. I think especially that last slide really sums it up. That's stark. The innovation ecosphere is very complex, and it spans many disparate activities: invention, R&D work to take an idea into reality, manufacturing, product, brand strategy, launch, commercialization, so many different areas included in the innovation ecosphere. And IP practitioners of all types play a different role in that ecosphere. And they each have an ability to help inventors and entrepreneurs seek and obtain enforceable IP rights that are strategic and can help them grow their business and grow their ideas into additional ideas. Each of our panelists has a unique leadership role in the different areas of the diversity and innovation ecosphere. So I'm going to have them highlight the things that they're working on in their organizations and personally working on to help support or make change within the innovation ecosphere. And I'll start with you, Valencia. If you could tell us a little bit about some of the key USPTO work in this space.
Thank you, Sandra. It's good to be here, and I agree with you. This is an amazing panel. I'm really excited to be part of it. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming out and having this discussion with us. So the USPTO has always had an eye on more inclusive innovation and IP community. So we've had amazing, very well put together series of training and outreach and innovation programs. About 3.5 years ago, when we put out the Success Act report, identifying what Elodie was speaking on just a few minutes ago, and really having the hard numbers of how few women and people of color and veterans and disabled are actually part of such an amazing community as the innovation and IP community. One of the events we decided, or initiatives we decided to put together, was pulling together this council that will be responsible in assisting the USPTO into driving more into inclusion. And one of the big parts of the council and what we're doing through Council of Innovation is the fact that I'm pretty confident everyone in this room takes part in some way or form. That's why you're here, of building a more inclusive IP community and innovation community, but coming together and making sure that we are supporting each other in our initiatives, that we are building initiatives that complement each other, that we're sharing best practices is how we're going to have the impact that we're looking for. So that's what the Council for Inclusive Innovation means to do. And we have representatives from all sectors of the IP and innovation community. So we have CEOs of large industry, and we have small business owners. We have university presidents, and we have professional organizations, nonprofit organizations represented. We have VCs. We also have government executives who are represented. So as diverse as we're trying to build an innovation community, we built a diverse council as well. So we have people from all of the groups that I mentioned to you that we're looking to pull more into. So we have women represented, we have people of color represented, we have veterans represented, because in order to move forward, we have to include everyone, which is exactly what we're trying to do. So we can't do that if we're not building a council that represents exactly that. So I'm really excited about the efforts, the commitments that the council have put in, part being each person from the council, as well as many, many other very, very interested organizations being part of a working group that is assisting the USPTO in pulling together the best practices so that we will be putting out a national strategy that builds a roadmap of how to accomplish it with the impact that we're looking for. So we're starting at the very youngest, at pre-K, and introducing STEM and STEAM, introducing inventorship and innovation, and I tell people all the time, because I've heard, not as often lately, but I've heard at that age, how can they really understand those concepts? if you can have a 2 or 3-year-old Tiger Woods who can swing a club better than me, then you can teach a 2 and 3-year-old about STEAM and STEM and innovation, and build on that education and that awareness and opportunity all along an inventor's lifespan, through elementary school and college and in their first jobs, and at that point when they have those ideas and they're inspired on invention and innovation and entrepreneurship, making sure they have support of the people around them. That's everyone in this room, to participate in making sure they have what they need in order to move forward and to be inspired with their ideas to come to fruition of, be it a patent, trademark, copyright, building a small business, that we have provided them the networks, the mentoring, the coaching, the allyship, the sponsorship in order to be successful. And beyond that, if it is becoming a patent owner, that's not where the journey ends. That's the next beginning of how are we supporting those innovators and those inventors in realizing that through commercialization, through finding the appropriate funding. So that's what we are working with the working group to build, is that strategy, that roadmap from beginning to that final realization of those ideas. Some of the things that the USPTO has put in place, inspired by the strategy and the work that we're doing with the working group, are a few initiatives. One being, we've just mentioned it, Director Vidal mentioned it yesterday, but she put out a blog a few weeks ago about some initiatives, one being having an expedited petition for first-time filers who are also micro-entity status, in order to give them that boost that they need through the IP system. And part of the petition is a requirement to take a basic training, which I've seen amazing basic training tools through Invent Together, through NIF, that, you know, just everyone should see. Everyone should take advantage of learning not only about the basics of patent examination, but why it's important to be an inventor, to be an innovator. So that's one initiative that we're moving forward with. A second is an innovation internship. So we put a vacancy announcement out not too long ago, and it is for those beginning their junior year in undergraduate school in science and engineering fields to come on board to the USPTO and learn about innovation, learn about how to adapt what they're learning in school, so that by the time they get out of college, they'll have that greater understanding of the innovation community as a whole, and that beginning to realization of ideas and how they can support that effort as members of the innovation community. So it's a 2-year program where we will pay them, because there's a lot of externships out there, but college students need money. So we will be paying them, and it's also across the nation. They don't have to come to the headquarters anymore. They can stay right there, as convenient as it is for them, wherever they're in school, to participate in the program and learn more about the USPTO, but also innovation as a whole. Another program that we are working on is an innovation outreach program. So the best way to provide access to the opportunities is to go to where the person we're trying to meet is. So we have at the USPTO the pleasure of a nationwide workforce. So we need to make sure that we are leveraging and using that workforce across this nation, because part of what we're doing here is reaching those in areas of our nation where there's innovation deserts. And because we have the pleasure of this workforce that have expertise in engineering and science, in patent processing and procedures to make sure that they are participating in their local communities. So we'll use our employees in their local communities across this nation to reach out and better educate not only those who we're trying to reach who may not have had the access, but those who teach them as well. Because once we leave that area, that local community, part of our goal is to leave the experience behind and to educate the educators to make sure that they're expanding on what we've taught. And the last one that I want to talk about is our pro bono and IP law clinics. In a nationwide, once again, program with the pro bono and IP law clinics, and we're working very aggressively to add more law clinics and add more people to each of the state pro bono programs. So I'm going to ask each and every one of you out there who's not part of this program to go onto our webpage and take a look at the pro bono program and see how you can actively be part of this process of bringing education, awareness, and opportunity to all of those inventors, all of those innovators out there who just haven't had the support yet. That should be you. So I'm going to stop there and hand it back to Sandra.
Valencia, I think there are some postcards floating around this event that have your QR code to get more information about the pro bono program.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you so much. Yes, right outside the door, there are postcards with the QR code, so you can scan that and take a look at how you can participate in this program.
Wonderful. Well, I love the clear guidance on things every single person in this audience can pick up and do moving forward. That's what we're really trying to do, is propel awareness into action. So with that, Holly, why don't you tell us some of the ways Invent Together is doing exactly that?
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sandra, for putting together this fantastic panel, and really appreciate the commitment that IPO has made to these issues. And of course, thanks to everybody for coming to hear this. We hope that it is time well spent for you. So as Sandra said, I'm the executive director of Invent Together. We have been at this work since about 2015, but we didn't form ourselves formally until 2020. But what we are is an alliance of stakeholders, organizations, corporations, universities, and we are dedicated to understanding the diversity gaps in invention and patenting, and working on both public policy and private sector solutions to solve them. And just to give you a flavor for some of the partners that we work with, the National Urban League, Anita B., which is the largest association of women technologists in the country, many different universities, Autumn, the Association of Technology Transfer Managers. So please think about whether your company or organization might be interested in becoming a partner with Invent Together. But just to give you a feel for our mission, we work in many areas, including research, public policy, public education and events, and also convenings. One of the things that we really try to do is bring together a community of people from different settings who are dedicated to this issue. And of course, one of the first things that we did as an organization, because we are committed to solutions that are based on data, is to commission research. So we have worked with the Institute for Women's Policy Research, a think tank in Washington, D.C., to produce 4 different studies. The first one was in 2016, which was basically to try to pull together all of the existing information about the inventor diversity gaps. And that sort of set us off on our journey for many of the other things that we have done. But let me just add on to what Elodie said. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work with Elodie in her research at WIPO and Invent Together. And she talked about just the really alarming global statistics. But as you can see, different countries do a bit differently, and we've got some ground to make up here in the United States, as well as trying to excel. We've got quite a long way to go, I think you'll see. But as Director Vidal said yesterday, right now, in terms of the United States, we see that of US patents, only 13% have a woman inventor. And what's even more troubling is that only 5.5% of commercialized patents are women-owned patents. And of course, the statistics related to race in the United States are deeply troubling. Dr. Lisa Cook, who formerly was a professor at Michigan State University and now is on the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve, has done really groundbreaking research in this area. And she has found that African-American patenting in the United States peaked in 1899 and has not recovered since. So that is certainly a challenge that we need to face and we need to take seriously. We are grateful for other researchers in this area. Dr. Alex Bell and his team at Harvard had done some fascinating research related to exposure to inventioning during childhood and what an incredible difference that makes for people later in life. But the other pretty astounding statistic that they found is that children and families in the top 1% of family income are 10 times more likely to patent than children in the entire bottom half of family income. So we certainly have some socioeconomic factors at play here that we need to address. So let me talk for a minute about public policy, and then later in the program, I'd love to add more about some of the other areas that we're working in. But we are grateful to work with bipartisan members of Congress, and we've had 2 successes that we're proud of. We worked with members to introduce the Success Act that passed in 2018, and that bill directed the USPTO to do their own study, which I expect Valencia will talk about, a really groundbreaking study that they produced, but also to give their thoughts on what further actions needed to be taken. And one of the conclusions of the Success Act report was that we don't have the necessary data. And so the next bill at Invent Together that we worked on was getting the IDEA Act introduced. And what that bill does is it directs the USPTO to collect demographic data on patent applicants on a voluntary basis to be collected and shared in the aggregate for research purposes. Now, that bill has not become law yet, although it has passed both bodies of Congress, so we're very hopeful. Another success that we had just happened recently, and this was the passage of the CHIPS and Science Act. This is a $280 billion bill that the President signed in August, which creates many opportunities for research in the United States. So inventing and patenting, of course, starts with research and creative ideas. And so making sure that we as a country are investing in research and creating entrepreneurial opportunities. The bill also provides $13 billion in funding for STEM and invention education. It creates a chief diversity officer at the National Science Foundation, as well as directing all of the scientific agencies in the United States to come up with caregiving policies. So work-family issues are addressed, as well as it provides resources for research on sexual harassment and discrimination in scientific and technological fields. So we're excited about the implementation of that bill. The Congress still needs to fund a number of the programs, but for example, the NSF has already begun setting up this new Directorate of Technology and these regional innovation hubs around the country to spur more research with a focus on ensuring that women and people of color have those opportunities to access the new programs. So I think I too will stop there and look forward to our conversation.
All right, well, Sam, you are very involved in looking at legislation from the IPO perspective. Why don't you talk to us about some of the many things that IPO does in this area?
I have the best job because I get to sit here and talk about things that IPO and our associated education foundation have done, but they're really done by all the people out there, and I'm, just getting to brag about them. So IPO and our education foundation really see increasing diversity in the innovation ecosphere as imperative. The association, of course, really is, the group that advocates legislative change to Congress, works with the PTO to work on policy issues, and we, have our constituency of industry and their legal representation. So bloom where you're planted, right? The Women in IP Committee of IPO, after learning about the very dismal statistics that came out of WIPO and the PTO, in, I think, 2019, launched our Diversity and Innovation Toolkit, originally the Gender Diversity Toolkit. We owe such a debt of gratitude to Sandra, who did a ton of work on creating this toolkit, and I think Mercedes Meyer might have been the person who said, we got to do something about this. And since then, we've expanded our toolkit to address diversity sort of across various categories, leveraging input from companies, from governmental entities. We have created a blueprint that companies can use to assess where they are and then make steps to move the needle on gender parity and other diverse representation in their companies. For just a plug, you can find that toolkit on the IPO website. IPO members have some special access that they can use. We also have a law firm complement to that outside counsel can use to work with their corporate clients to implement the toolkit and improve client relationships, et cetera. Of course, the IDEA Act is something that IPO came out early to support. It complements a lot of our organization's initiatives and priorities. As Holly mentioned, there were those two sort of behemoth bills that ultimately turned into the CHIPS Act, and we were really pleased to see that the IDEA Act was in those, but ultimately the scope changed a bit in the final passage, but we are going to continue to partner with Invent Together and try to see some progress on that in future years. IPO also has partnered with the USIPA to promote the Diversity Pledge. There was a panel about that yesterday that was moderated by the PTO director, trying to encourage our company members to understand and address the issue of underrepresented inventors internally. So we're going to continue to encourage our members to take the pledge. We are constantly having new resources created by member committees, including a diversity in the EU white paper. So, stay tuned to our daily news, check out our website for resources. We have a resources page for our diversity and inclusion initiatives that you can access that talk about our initiatives, but also amplify some of my friend organizations over here. The IPO Education Foundation has a somewhat different mission. A strategic priority for that organization is innovation and creation by, within, and for underrepresented communities. And they have created a lot of programs that reach out to folks in underrepresented communities at different sort of stages in the education process, in, age categories. We have a podcast called Stroke of Genius that explores stories from the world of IP. We feature inventors, talk about patenting, talk about various aspects of IP, and try to really bring in people who are in underrepresented groups who can talk about the benefits that they have been able to bring to society, to industry, whatever, as a result of their status as inventors or creators, et cetera. We also have the IP patch that I think started about a decade ago in partnership with the PTO and the Girl Scouts and has now sort of expanded more broadly. That familiarizes students grades 2 through 10 with invention and IP and encourages them to enter STEM careers. And I think I'll probably stop there in terms of our diversity and innovation, but I just wanted to say that we see the IP ecosystem as a really large space, and as practitioners, we are part of that. IPO in particular focuses a lot on increasing diversity and representation in the legal profession. And to that end, our Diversity and Inclusion Committee, which was created a few years ago by Henry Haddad, focuses on recommending policy initiatives that are consistent with our values of, seeking to incorporate diversity and inclusion in all of our activities as an organization. We have a practical guide to diversity and inclusion in the legal profession that you can get on our website, and that resource encourages companies to prioritize diversity in their legal departments and talks about how to train and maintain these practices. We talk about things like defining diversity, inclusion, and implicit bias, why companies should prioritize these issues, and assessing potential causes and ways to address those. So I'll stop there, Sandra, but again, I have the best job because you guys created all of these tools and I just get to talk about them and take credit.
Get to brag about them, yes. Elodie, WIPO really came out with the first report. It was Working Paper 33 in 2016 that really set the stage for so much of this work and research. Tell us what WIPO has been doing since 2016, because they are very active in this area.
Thank you. So indeed, I am a recent hire, so I wasn't there long enough to see all of that happen, but I've been catching up on the initiative. And what I can tell you is that we have, our team has been developing this tool that is called the World Gender Name Dictionary, and we used it for that report in 2016, and we realized that there were some limitations on that tool, so we improved upon it, and we released a more recent version that is way much better in 2021. Then we made sure that gender statistic would be included in the PCT yearly review, which is a review of PCT filing every year. And we have this gender indicator associated. And in this statistic that I just presented you, I've been working on revising the different metrics, the different indicators that are going to be implementing in the future PCT yearly review as well. And as they mentioned before, we have this ongoing collaboration with Invent Together, with IPO to keep moving the needle forwards. And beyond our team, we also have the creative economy sector. So I'm in the innovation economy sector. And in the creative economy sector, they have also been investigating the gender gap in creative industries. They found, for instance, that only 40% of comics creators are women. They looked into trademark as well for some countries, and hopefully we get these statistics at the global level. WIPO also has a gender champion, Lisa Jorgensen, who has been offering policy advice and recommendation on best practices to include women's participation, increase women participation in patenting. And they have all sorts of programs to support women entrepreneurs in underdeveloped countries. So this is where we go.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I think it's really important to highlight all the great work being done by individual organizations. But now I kind of want to turn the next question to really anyone on the panel to talk about, we're each in our own pillars doing great and amazing work, but how do we collaborate amongst our pillars, certainly with the organizations on this panel, and we could probably list 10, 15, 20 others that are working in this area. How do we collaborate well, and what's the importance of collaboration in this space?
Well, I would love to answer that, Sandra, because that really was the perfect purpose of creating Invent Together. Because we really do see that it's so much easier to share best practices if you're in a safe space and talking with other people who are also trying to solve the same problems. But that's also why we have commissioned some of this research. One of the materials that you have is the most recent study that we've come out with from the Institute for Women's Policy Research. And first, we focused on quantitative work, but this study is qualitative work. It's talking with women inventors, women of color inventors about exactly what are the barriers and challenges that they face. And I think the results really go to the question of collaboration and best practices, because what we see, there are some significant barriers that move across different sectors, but when you think about solutions, I think we really do need to think about how corporations are somewhat different than universities, are somewhat different than addressing the challenges for individual inventors and startup companies. But so many of the barriers really are the same. And let me just list some of them, because I think this is where collaboration comes in, because we see these barriers that people are facing, across the different sectors. So of course the issue of representation in STEM and other types of educational training that create opportunities to be an inventor. The caregiving and domestic responsibilities that fall unequally on some people. Being the only one in the room. This was something that came up over and over again in the interviews that IWPR had with women and women of color inventors, is often they felt the challenge, the burden of being the only one in the room. And that really leads into issues related to stereotyping, discrimination, and bias. And I think we all know that policies and practices are needed to really try to overcome those stereotypes and biases that come up in all kinds of settings, many times unconscious biases. One issue is the lack of formal education in patenting, and I think we can talk more about ways that people are addressing that. And then, of course, informal mentoring, because many people have formal programs, but we see that really sort of taking somebody under your wing, somebody different from you, can be just an incredible step forward.
Sandra, if I could say, I think that the toolkit that our Women in IP committee have created is a really excellent example to doing collaboration well. Sometimes collaboration is direct involvement, conversations where you pursue a project together. Sometimes it's a relay race. And when an organization like WIPO publishes data that is really dismaying, an organization like IPO can think about, well, we could move the needle on that. We have all these companies who probably could help make some improvement. And I think that it's really important for any organization to do sort of a self-assessment of who I am, or who we are, who our constituents are, what our external reach is, and really, work in our own lanes. And sometimes I think that, especially as a trade association, it can be really a natural instinct to think you're competing with other people and things that you're pursuing, but really we're all running in the same direction, and sometimes we hand that baton off to each other, and sometimes we, are running side by side. So I think that we can all think about the concrete ways that our constituents can take action and how we can amplify each other's messages, with our own audiences.
So I agree with what both Sam and Holly said, and just to add a little bit more to that, the collaboration is key. I mentioned earlier that there are amazing things being done across all the sectors of IP and innovation that are moving the needle, but we're looking to go beyond that. And to do that, we have to do it together. Mm-hmm. And the IPO toolkit is just amazing. You guys did just a phenomenal job there. And one of the things that, as Sam was saying, is that maturity assessment beginning. You have to know any organization, I don't care what sector you're in, you have to know where you're starting in order to move that needle. And the best way to do that is to share data. And that's a big, scary beast, I know, for a lot of companies, to reveal to everyone that you're not doing well in this space. But if you don't add that transparency of where you are and share and discuss that with people within your own sector and outside of that sector about best practices, about gaps, about how to avoid those gaps, then we're not getting where we want to be. And where we want to be is there's no such need for a term like underrepresented within innovation and IP community. So collaboration, we have to let each other know where we are and how to help each other get to the next steps.
And if I may add, I think collaboration is the reason why we managed to get tools that are that help everyone. And when WIPO had to figure out how to get a tool that would allow us to guess, because we don't have first-hand data, to guess the gender of inventors, there were no such tool that would apply across the world. And the only way that WIPO managed to do that is through collaboration with all the national IP offices around the world. And in particular, at the moment, WIPO was trying to come up with that tool. The UK IPO was also trying to do exactly the same thing. And thanks to the collaboration between the two of us, we made this happen in a remarkably quick time, and this is what we need to see, is that if we all work each one on our side, we may arrive at the same result, but it won't be as efficient and as quick as if we work all together.
Yeah, I think collaboration is key. I will say, Holly, you mentioned the IWPR study. The first one was, I believe, 2016. And that study estimated that we would not reach parity until 2096. And as I was preparing for this, I was updating some slides that I had, and I saw that 3 years ago, that number changed to 2080. And the most recent number was 2058. And I think that that's a real signal that so many of these individual, but also collaborative efforts are starting to pay off. And so I wanted to have the next question be, name one or two specific things that you've seen in the last, 8 years, 7, 8 years, that you think have helped to move that needle. Because the needle is moving, and it's moving in the right direction.
So I'll start with that, and I have to go back to data. I have to go back to the fact that more organizations are starting to share data, and it's still, we're not where we need to be, but I think that's a piece of it, and we have organizations like IPO, WIPO, Invent Together, USIPA, who are pushing that. And I love the fact that you're not afraid to be aggressive about pushing your colleagues and saying, why aren't you? And that level of pressure is helping to force them to start sharing, look at themselves, look at where they are, and be able to share that information.
Yesterday, the PTO director said if we quadruple the number of inventors, we could increase GDP by $1 trillion. And when I think about this, I think about value propositions, right? For me, I think, I just think that it's the right thing to do to increase representation of all groups in inventing. For others, it's a show me the money situation, right? And so to the extent that we have been able to show companies, look, this is good for your bottom line through efforts like the toolkit and collaboration with the Diversity Pledge and other efforts along those lines. I was listening to the panel yesterday. I think Phyllis might have mentioned that it's important for the executive leadership team in her company to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion internally, and that includes increasing representation. You have people on your teams. If they're not all, if you're not using their talent equally, then you're missing out. You're leaving money on the table.
One thing I've seen is there's such commitment in all the sectors. I mean, the federal government has never done so much. This effort by the USPTO and the Council for Inclusive Innovation is truly exciting. All the leading associations have efforts. We see so much more activity from different companies doing self-assessments. Same with universities. People are taking the steps necessary. And I really do echo the sentiment that anytime somebody is starting a program, they really need to put in place measuring and monitoring, because we need the baseline, and then we need to be able to show people what difference it makes when you take these steps. But I think, as we've all tried to suggest, this is a broad ecosystem. And it's not just a pipeline problem. It's not like we can just say, okay, let's get more people of color and women trained in STEM, and this will solve the problem. Let me just point out, for example, Qualcomm has this really cool program called the Think of It Lab, where they are working with middle school kids, many from many girls and children of color, to gain an invention education mindset. So I think, we see programs like that. FIRST has some exciting programs that try to train kids in invention education. One new commitment that we've made, we really distinguish this idea of invention education and patent education. Mm-hmm. And the USPTO does some fabulous programs on patent education. As Valencia mentioned in her opening remarks, we at Invent Together now have a new patent education tool, which I would encourage all of you to take a look at. It's a free online tool called the Inventors Patent Academy. And what we tried to do was distill patent education into a brief free online course, but we worked with patent diversity experts to try to make sure that we didn't just have the right content, we were really speaking to people. We use interviews with diverse inventors, but I would encourage you just to go to our website, inventtogether.org, and anybody can use this free education tool.
I have to add that this course is absolutely amazing. I took it because I was curious about it, and you can feel that if you are not the majority, you still feel very welcome, which is not true for all sorts of courses. It's very easy to follow if you're deaf, if you're, I guess, blind, but I'm not sure. I'm not blind. But if you're a person of color, if you are a woman, you have lots of examples from successful inventors from these backgrounds. And this is just very inspiring, and it is free. And, it would be so easy to hand this course to persons who may be inventors but don't identify as such, or who are inventors but don't feel that patenting is for them. Then they would just have a look at the course and maybe they would change their mind. And I think it's so easy to end that course to someone who needs it. It's just 1 second, and it can make a big difference.
All right, well, I'm hearing.
I want to just add one more
Yes,
thing that
please.
really, after Ellie was speaking, really, I've seen a huge change in its global look at this problem. Part of my work is working with other IPOs, and 5 years ago, I remember having a visit to a country and trying to speak to someone, a female attorney, about the work that she was doing and how's it going. And she kind of quieted me down a little bit to speak lower, not let others hear about the fact that there were so many issues with women in intellectual property. And this past General Assemblies in the Geneva General Assemblies, Director Vidal had a series of, I think it was about 26 bilateral meetings with other offices, and every single office had an agenda topic of diversity, be it, complete diversity or gender equity. That was a huge difference in a short period of time.
No, that's a great point. All right, well, I'm hearing other rooms applaud, so we are going to do really fast lightning round to wrap it up. So one pithy takeaway that you want our audience members to leave with. Holly, we'll start with you and we'll run down the row.
Everybody has a role to play. Please educate yourself about this issue and choose one thing that you can do to take action to help it. There's one thing you can actually do. Thanks so much.
I'm going to say data, data, data.
That works.
I'm going to say growth mindset's really important, right? When we first started working on tools that our members could use, we focused on gender. That was for a number of reasons, but the main one was what the data available showed us and what we could actually measure. Was that a panacea? No, but we were able to iterate on that. And I think taking one step and then the next right step and the next right step is how you make progress on anything, but on this also.
And I would say that every single one of us that is not doing something to help gender and diversity inclusion in patenting is slowing the progress of everyone else down. That's it.
All right, well, I'm going to sneak in and get my own, but I'm going to re-echo what Director Vidal said yesterday, and I think she said, get off the bench. So very much what Holly said. There's so many great ideas here, so many great resources in our materials for you to see one thing that you could do to help change this trajectory. So please take a look and please engage. Thanks, everyone.